Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.
Welcome to Dad's Eye View, where we hope to address parental issues from a loving dad's point of view. It is my desire that we talk together, learn together, but more importantly, that we strive to parent together. I'm your host, Kenneth Braswell, and welcome to the show. Today's guests, Greg Owens and Sabrina Houser. Welcome to the show.
Thanks.
Thanks, Ken.
Let me introduce you before we get started. Greg Owens is the Director of Special Projects in the Office of Strategic Planning and Policy Development for the Office of Children and Family Services and has responsible for statewide initiatives including mentoring, youth gangs and violence, disproportionate minority representation, cultural competence, and responsible fatherhood. Sabrina Houser is the CEO of Big Brothers and Big Sisters of the Capital Region, where they are proud to serve more than 500 children annually from Albany, Schenectady, Rensselaer, and Saratoga counties. In 2006, the organization was chosen by Big Brothers and Big Sisters of America as one of the top 35 best performing agencies in the nation. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And before we move on, I'd like to thank Jennifer Dugan and Nate Whitechuck, who did an awesome article for us in Latham Life about the show. So pick up Latham Life and learn all about Dad's Eye View. So let's get started this morning. You know, the issue of mentoring, across the country, and particularly in the Capital Region, is a serious issue. As many more of our children are growing up without their dads in their households, as parents are finding, ways to compensate for this economic turmoil that we in by both parents going to work. There's many reasons why we need mentoring for our children. But tell me a little bit about your role in the field of mentoring, and either one can start first.
Why don't you?
Okay. As you stated, I'm currently the CEO for the mentoring agency. I actually started with the program as a big sister in 1996, and the experience completely changed my life. Not the reason I got into it. I honestly just wanted to spend some time with a child and thought that I could give back to a little girl, and instead what I received was a career change. She changed my idea of family. She allowed me to relive a childhood that I didn't even know existed. It's truly the most important thing we can be doing in our communities.
Okay.
Like Sabrina, I've been a mentor, but even before that, I've been mentored. And so as I reflect upon that, this notion of giving back and reciprocity is a part of I hope, a part of my value system and who I am. For the state, my job really is to try and find ways to build the capacity for mentoring entities to exist and grow, mostly in collaborations and partnerships. And so we're not trying to go around and identify individual organizations that we can help. That's a funding process for another part of the organization. What I'm trying to do is go out and encourage people to come together in times of fiscal strife and reduced resources to work together to share to share their resources and grow safe and effective mentoring in that fashion.
Sabrina, a lot of people think that you have to be a parent first to become a mentor. Do you think that being a mentor first helped you with your parental responsibilities?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so.
I honestly didn't know if I wanted to be a mom at all. And I knew I loved children, and I knew that they're such an important part of our future. But I just didn't know if that was for me. And I do think a lot of people come into it feeling as though I don't have the experience with a child. I don't even know how I would interact with a child. And they take that role from you. They guide the way. They let you know what they want to do, what they don't want to do, what activities they enjoy. And like I said, I'm now a mom of a 2-year-old, and I give that credit to my little sister of she opened up a world to me that I didn't know existed until I was with her.
Before the show, Sabrina and I were sitting outside kind of watching parents go in and out of the library, you know, and there was one dad walking out and his son just had a mental breakdown, you know, at the door. And we were kind of talking about how we as moms and dads really, you know, nurture our children differently. And I was saying if that was my son, I would have done the same thing he did, which was kind of pick him up, and he would calm the minute I picked him up. If it was his mom, he'd still be rolling around in the corridor downstairs. And, you know, it's one of those kind of parental differences that we don't pay a lot of attention to, but it's something that we should probably incorporate more in terms of understanding how we do parent differently. Greg, knowing that that mentoring is important, that it can be beneficial to someone who's looking to be a parent, why is it so difficult to get people to recruit to be mentors?
It's an interesting situation. Nationally, and Sabrina, I'm sure you know this too, we've got this thing called this mentoring gap. And basically it's those young people who could benefit from a mentor versus those who are in mentoring relationships. And I think the literature says about 3 million in mentoring relationships currently, but 15 million could benefit from a mentor. So you got this 14, 13 million person mentoring gap. And so the question is, why can't you get more people to step up and do this thing that we know really works? One of the things is we don't really explain it very well. Okay. I think people have a lot of misconceptions about what mentoring is. I think it involves a lot of money, all consuming in terms of their time. They have to make choices between their family and a young person, and so we have this misconception about what mentoring really is. We don't market it well in terms of outcomes, and how you can get to great outcomes by 4 hours a month for a year. I mean, most people that I talk to don't realize that that's really what we're talking about. 4 hours a month for a year. That should be our mantra. 4 hours a month for a year. And then people will begin to think about it differently rather than an all-consuming every day during the week, 365 days a year, and I've got to put out a bunch of money also.
Right. You know, we know that, you know, research says that today 24 million of our children are waking up each morning without their biological fathers in their lives. And a lot of times we find difficulty in really understanding why it's so difficult to get mentors. And sometimes I believe that the answer is in that $24 million number. And so it always leads us to have this conversation about father absence. And if the both of you can answer this question from your own perspectives, how do you believe father absence in our communities is contributing to the need for more mentors?
Currently, the children in our program, 98% of them either have a single parent, struggle with low income, or have an incarcerated parent. The majority of our single parents are being raised by moms. So I would say the lack of a father figure brings a lot of our single moms, especially with little boys, to the table to say he is surrounded by female support. He needs a man in his life. He needs a man that can show him how to grow up and be a responsible man. He needs a man that can show him what being a man in this community is about. Although I can provide basic needs, I can provide love, I can provide motherly support, I can't provide that male relationship that he so desperately needs. And that's why moms do come to us.
Wow.
I certainly concur, and I think the notion of the absence of males in communities really destabilizes communities. It makes them less than complete and less than completely healthy. And so what you've got is children growing up in a community that is operating at a deficit just because this male absence is so profound. And in some of our urban areas, it's even at critical stage, where you don't have any men at all there, and a proliferation of single parents and lots of children with that unhealthy situation.
Right. And you know, we kind of talk about mentoring and we talk about father absence, and we know that those numbers are disproportionately larger in urban communities, and it's a conversation we must have. At the same time, understanding that any child without a biological parent in their lives are suffering on one end, whether or not they're missing their moms or missing their dads. But today, missing their dads is much more prevalent than missing their moms, and it's an issue that we must deal with, because I believe that father absence is the engine to many of our social ills. Absolutely. And if we can figure out how to deal with that and bring fathers emotionally and financially back into the lives of their children, we can solve a lot of our issues, you know, for our children. But going back to the urban issue, and I know that many of the Capital Region mentorship programs are suffering with one particular issue, and that is the recruitment of black males to be mentors mentors for many of the children who happen to be children of color, who are on that disproportionate end of growing up in single-parent households. We know, based on recent research, that 73% of black babies born today are born to single-mother households. About 52% Latino and about 38% white children are being born into single-family households. A lot of people will argue that race doesn't matter. Where does it matter with regards to mentoring?
I think race is a part of culture, and culture always matters. Race, ethnicity, gender, socioeconomic status, that's all part of this mosaic called culture. And so you can ill afford to ignore culture. And so I think the literature says that race doesn't necessarily play a predominant role when you look at outcomes. You can get good outcomes with cross-racial matches. So then it backs into the issue of values. And what kind of program do you want? What kind of outcome do you want for a specific target population? Interestingly enough, race does matter when you look at early termination of mentoring relationships for black girls. For some reason, those relationships tend to end a bit earlier. And so this notion of why black girls have this issue, or why those matches don't last as long as opposed to targeting these girls as having an issue, becomes part of that conversation. So you've got to kind of disaggregate this and figure out what your program outcomes really look like in all of its dimensions, and race and ethnicity has to be considered too.
Right. You bring up a good point about girls. You know, because a lot of times in this field of mentoring, when we talk about mentoring, we more heavily talk about boys, you know, in terms of finding mentors with boys. But increasingly, we see girls in more of a need, you know, of mentors. We know that girls now represent the highest number of the increase in incarcerated individuals. There are more girls being incarcerated today than ever in the history, you know, of our country. And so now that we know that, and now that we know we must be able to focus on both boys and girls, is there a difference in mentoring for either or the other?
I don't know if there's as much of a difference. You know, with our organization, we're still at a 2-to-1 ratio. For every little girl that comes through our door wanting a mentor, there's 2 boys. And it's the reverse with our mentors. For every, you know, 1 male, we'll get 2 female volunteers. So our organization has really looked at ways of trying to reach out to the vast little boys looking for a mentor. And we do some cross-gender matching with little boys and with big sisters, just because the wait list of little boys is so much larger. The mentoring aspect of exactly what Greg said, the message of you really don't have to change your life to change the life of a child, is the same. You don't have to be a superhero, you don't have to be a millionaire. You really just have to be a friend to a child. We're not looking for tutors, teachers, counselors. We're looking for everyday people that just want to spend some time with a kid, just to be a friend. That's all we're looking for. So that relationship is the same, both male and female.
But you know, it is kind of the societal thing where we do look at boys and girls much differently. Particularly when it comes to issues, you know, and I take as an example, you know, teen pregnancy. You know, all of the money and all of the attention goes to teenage girls who are becoming pregnant, but none of the attention goes to the boys who are at the other end of that spectrum. So it seems like even our field of work, when we're dealing with mentors, fall under that same gender issue. Agree?
Absolutely, and I think what you have is a translation of that into how we deal with men in many of our systems of care and custody in general. I mean, you look at the history of child welfare and how men were perceived if they were not really married and a part of that family. They were not really connected in terms of our systems view. As a matter of fact, they were seen as being a problem. And you could lose some benefits if the man was caught in the house, even though that man was a contributor. So our public policy about this has really gotten in the way of doing some good work. And I think it relates to what we need to do about looking at men differently in this regard with recruiting mentors. We have to show that we value as much as we do any other member of the family. And particularly in Michigan did a real nice webinar on recruitment of black men as mentors. mentors to show that, first of all, you can do this because it doesn't take rocket science or special abilities and skills, as you've indicated, Sabrina. And also, what this thing really is all about is real critical. Because, again, we bring our mythology to it. People are time poor, and there are other circumstances that keep us from stepping up.
You know, a lot of times we do, with regards to mentoring, tend to kind of circle around urban children. You know, and we know in the capital region that we have a lot of rural areas, too. What's different about the two of those?
I would say that in rural areas, it's just more difficult to get to services. So those children have a completely different challenge against them. In urban areas, everything is around you. You know, services are around you, but so are people, and so is crime, and so is, you know, the support systems. Whereas in rural areas, it's more difficult for our mentors to get to them unless they also live in that community. But it's just much harder for them to be able to reach out and gather services that might be at fingertips for people in urban settings.
You know, I was this morning, as I was coming in and preparing for the show, you know, I was reminded by my wife of the poll that came out some time ago that described Colonie as one of the safest towns, you know, in America. You know, so knowing that that is our audience, sometimes it's very difficult to have a conversation about what's taking place outside of this town. But what should people in an area like a Colonie know about mentoring, and how could someone in an area like Colonie contribute to providing mentors for programs in areas that are in desperate need of mentors?
Go right ahead.
You and I were speaking this morning about how diverse Colonie is, and yes, it is an extremely wonderful, community-centered neighborhood, but there is diversity, and there is poverty, and there are people struggling to make ends meet, so you can truly help right in your own local community. If you're willing to travel 5-10 minutes outside of that circle to help a child in downtown Albany, mentoring outcomes are, we don't just intuitively know mentoring works. It's everywhere, but the evaluations and outcomes that come out of these relationships change communities, not just the life of a child and not just the life of that mentor. Truly, the ripple effect is these are people that are going to grow up and be your neighbors. These are the kids that are going to grow up and be your employees, your coworkers, at times your employer. So don't you want to give that child a fighting chance in an area simply by what they were born into is allowing them to struggle. Just give them that fighting chance of 4 hours a month can really change how this child is going to grow up.
I think the other thing to add to what Sabrina has said is this notion of a particular child needing a mentor more than another one. I think all young people can benefit, all people in general. There's lots of workplace mentoring going on. And there's research on how that helps you move up in the organization. But every child, our children, will benefit from people who mentor them and show them the things that they can do in addition to the way that we parent. So I think every child can benefit from a mentor, and I think Colonie needs to understand that it's not the special needs children, it's not juvenile delinquent children, it's not, every child can benefit from having a mentor. And the notion of community service, that you move from the one-to-one or the group mentoring piece to enhancing a community when you do mentoring the right way, is a profound thing.
Right. If for a moment we could switch gears, because I want to give opportunity to talk about the Capital Region Mentor Partnership. Greg was the founder of that and started, you know, that, and he's been moving mentorship throughout the state, and him and I continue to work on, you know, really trying to penetrate all communities with regards to mentoring. Can you talk about the partnership?
Sure. I guess 5 or 6 years ago, we convened a group of people in the Albany area, in the Capital Region, who were doing mentoring or had an interest in mentoring. We invited Sean Dove from OSI and Gene Cohen, who runs the New York Long Island Mentoring Partnership here. And we talked about how we might form this collaboration. And so we had about 15 or 20 organizations that met regularly. I helped to convene those meetings. I believe that leadership needs to be indigenous, and so it doesn't need to be led by the state. And so once we got people together and got people moving in a direction, we stepped back from that role of convening meetings and establishing the agenda to trying to help out as much as we could in a supportive fashion from the state perspective. So we've moved to, again, as you indicated, Ken, going around the state trying to convince people to come together in groups and work together, but also to try and get mentoring on the agenda for the legislature. And we're trying to get a mentoring advisory council together that can advise the highest levels of government on the need to enhance and support safe and effective mentoring. So that's really my journey at this point.
And I want to shift you a little bit, because we know that in this time of economic difficulties, funding is an issue.
Absolutely.
Right. How is funding affecting Big Brothers and Big Sisters today?
Our agency in 2009 had to reduce its budget by 25%, an additional 30% in 2010. We've increased a little bit in 2011, but with federal cuts coming down, our agency is dependent 51% on grants. So with cuts coming down, we absolutely need to look at collaborative efforts, joining resources, and joining together for this fight on how important the service is to the community. So absolutely, the partnership with the Capital Region Mentoring Program has been so instrumental, and we do need to lead this charge of letting stakeholders know how important this mission is.
You know, in this field of social work, Greg, and we talk about this all the time, there's always this missing component, you know. So we have the community, we have government, and we have grassroots organizations that are all contributing to this work. But the missing element always tends to be corporate America and business. How do we include them in this work, and where do we find a comfortable position for them so that they can do good but do well at the same time?
Oh, I think that's a critical question, and there's lots of models around the country of how corporate America has really begun to invest in this, both as mentors for young people, so they have workplace mentoring that corporations are supporting, but also, of course, with the all-important funding and support from that perspective. But again, you take a look at the research. The outcomes in corporate America tend to be better for people who are mentoring than for employees who may not be mentoring. And so the boon, the benefit to corporate America is that you get employees that actually are performing better and are happier because they are mentoring. So I think those are messages that we have to convey in terms of marketing this.
Okay. So there's some people out there that are watching and they're on the bubble. We've just convinced them that mentoring is a good thing, right? But we need to convince them to actually get off of the bubble and actually come out and do something. If the two of you can give them some advice right now, what would that advice be about being really engaging in mentoring?
The best advice I can give somebody is exactly what I said earlier. You do not have to change your life to change the life of a child. The greatest thing I ever did with my little sister, and the thing she enjoyed the most, was we would go grocery shopping, get something to make for dinner that night, and cook together. I had to grocery shop anyway, so I had to make dinner that night anyway. It's that little. It's that little of what you can do. And through those activities, communications and bonds form. So it really is that simple. It's not a life-shattering, have to change your entire existence to be with this kid.
I think you have to do a self-assessment and figure out what it is you really feel about young people in general. Because you don't want somebody mentoring who really doesn't care much about young people. That's called a mismatch. So you really have to take a look at yourself and figure out what you really feel about these young folks out here today. And then, as Sabrina said, there's no special, talent that you need, except to commit to the time and commit to the commitment that you make. Because you've got to find mentors who are willing to stay with it. If you mentor 3 months or less, you actually have negative outcomes for these young people. Absolutely. Because it's another broken trust. So you've got to commit to 4 hours a month for the year to get to the kind of outcomes that's research driven. So I would ask somebody to really begin to take a look at what they do on a regular, natural basis. I mean, when we go to church, or our religious celebrations, if you will, every weekend, that's an hour or two that you could be sitting with a young person in your congregation and spending a bit of time. That's mentoring.
Absolutely.
That's exactly what it looks like.
Right.
So it's really not that difficult if you begin to look at the things you do kind of normally and naturally, and then say, yeah, why don't you come to this store with me?
And include them.
And include them.
Right.
Absolutely.
So since we're informing folks and we're really trying to get people motivated, we've dealt with corporate America. Now they're going to be coming and calling like crazy. We got the community, they're ready
Put
now.
the number up. Put the
Government is now like, ready to roll. And so then there's our faith-based institutions that are peppered throughout our community, doing great work in their own, aspects and in the work that they do within their four walls. How can they contribute to this, particularly those who are in, the spirit of helping community and doing more? How can they do more?
I would say invite us in, allow us to talk about what it is that we do, and allow us to help you form these relationships. And we have had a lot of faith-based communities come to us to discuss how is it that they can get involved. And just allowing that door to open so that we can come and speak at a congregation to say, this is all it takes. This is all you need to do, and if you're interested, we'd be happy to help.
Okay. Absolutely. And there are models out there. As you know, Macedonia has the mentoring program, partnering with Siena College. Partnering with the college is a possibility, partnering with another church. But I think, first of all, again, beginning to understand what this thing really is, and then asking the congregation as part of their commitment to doing their work from their religious perspective, this is what is required. There's no religion that doesn't require this.
Right.
That's right.
So that's part of what is expected in most religions that I'm aware of. So make it a part of that practice, and I think we'll get them to the table.
And I think the other piece is, what kind of mentoring can you do? Because you spoke earlier about people being really kind of apprehensive about getting into mentoring because they feel like they have to spend each and every waking moment of their lives with this kid, taking them to school, buying them school clothes, all the things that we kind of think about when we're biological parents. And that's not the case all the time. There's also group mentoring. What does group mentoring look like?
Go right ahead.
Our organization actually doesn't do group mentoring. All of our relationships are one-to-one. We do have site-based mentoring in which either children or volunteers go to a specific site and location and might meet in a group forum, but are allowed to use that site kind of as their playground. So it's still a one-to-one relationship. You might be meeting with another match, but it's still that one tie to that one child. But we do offer different kinds of mentoring. So there's the community-based mentoring that people typically think of when they think of Big Brothers, Big Sisters. And that's where you would go to a child's home, pick them up, do things out in the community that you both enjoy, and then drop that child back off. We do have workplace mentoring. We have some corporations that allow their employees work release time, and children are either bused to that corporation and they meet right on site, or the employee is allowed to leave and go to a partnering school and have lunch or breakfast with the child. So there are different ways to get involved. So it's really just talking to us and talking to your corporation. That avenue of workplace mentoring has opened the doors to busy professionals who feel that they don't have the time to mentor because they have to go home to their own families. But it allows them to be able to do it during the workday. Okay.
We have a couple of minutes before we end this. Contact information, how can one get involved with Big Brothers and Big Sisters?
Log right onto our website, www.bbbscr.org.
Say that a little slower.
Absolutely, sorry. www.bbbscr.org.
Greg, if someone wanted to get involved in the partnership, your contact information?
Actually, I tend to turn things over to Trish and the colleagues at the partnership. But if they want to contact me at the state, at the Office of Children and Family Services, go to that website, www.ocfs.state.ny.us. Go right to the link we have for mentoring, and they can contact me there, and I'll be happy to funnel that information.
Thank you both so much.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you.
For being on Dad's Eye View. This is our first episode, and we hope to come back many, many more times to bring you much more information from a loving dad's point of view. If you want more information on our organization, Fathers Incorporated, feel free to contact us at www.fathersincorporated.com. Until next time, take care.